Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John McDougall. I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book in Houston. And before we get started with our author event tonight, I'll do a couple just general store announcement stuff, let everybody know what's going on with us while everybody gets the live notification on Facebook and YouTube that we have started. So, as you guys may know, if you've been tuning into these, we have recently started hosting in-store events again, which we're super excited about. It's kind of hit or miss how many we do a week. I think the last one we did was probably like the 26th of, actually probably a little bit longer than that. But anyway, it's kind of hit or miss what we're doing. So when you're looking at the event calendar on the website, you're going to see things listed either as virtual or in-store. And we're going to keep doing that for a while. You know, once we're able to do more in-store stuff, we'll keep doing virtual stuff too. We're really excited about being able to play in both worlds. We've had a few people ask if we're going to plan on streaming the in-store stuff virtually. At the moment, we don't have plans to do that. We know we want to do it at some point, but for right now, it's been so long since we've been able to enjoy the in-store signing experience that we just want to make sure that we're focusing on the authors and the people that have shown up. So stay tuned for more information about whether or not we'll be doing that. But coming up next week, we are going to have CJ Box in store on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday of next week, we're going to have Jennifer Murphy, who is a Houston author who has a new book called Scarlet and Blue coming out. And then next Thursday, we're going to be doing a virtual event with Alex Finley, who's going to be chatting with Lisa Gardner, which we're super excited about as well. So make sure that you're checking up on the Murder by the Book website. Also, make sure you're checking out the signed book page because if we've got authors coming through, we've got all those listed on the signed book page, or if we have signed copies available from publishers, those are listed as well. I also wanted to mention we do have signed copies of tonight's book, so if you have not picked up your copy yet, you can order it at murderbooks.com. I have dropped a link in the comments where you can get more information about Rick and the book, and you can also order your signed copies. Other thing I wanted to mention about our in-store events is that we are requiring masks for them. The store, if you've been in the store, you'll know that the seating area is a little small. So we just want to make sure everybody is feeling comfortable. Most events are still working the same way from it to look at the event calendar. Let me get him pulled up. How are you tonight, Rick?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Of course.
And congratulations on the new book. As I mentioned, we've got signed copies of it, which we appreciate Blackstone being able to offer for us. So for those of you who might not know Rick yet, Rick Bleiweiss started his career in music as a rock performer, produced over 50 records, was a songwriter and record company senior executive, and worked with the Backstreet Boys, Kiss, U2, Whitney Houston, the Bee Gees, and other industry legends. Since 2006, as a publishing company executive, he has acquired works by best-selling and award-winning authors including James Clavell, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Rex Pickett, and Catherine Coulter, among others. In his latest career endeavor, he has crafted the Pignon Scorbion historical mystery series, blending his love of the past with the twisty deliciousness of a whodunit. So that's what we're going to be chatting about tonight. It looks like, sorry, Rick, it looks like
yes,
we are streaming on YouTube, but we are not streaming on Facebook because Facebook is having issues, but we're still going live on YouTube. So Facebook, it looks like they're going to keep trying and they will re-add the broadcast when it's working. So we will keep going because it looks like everything's at least working in one place. That I've not seen that message before. So clearly we jinxed ourselves when we were knocking on wood saying everything was working. So for those of you who are watching us on YouTube, I will pop over on the Facebook page in just a second and post that we're over there. But Rick, can you tell everybody a little bit about the new novel?
Yeah, I sure can. The novel takes place in 1910 in a fictitious countryside town in England called Haxford. And Haxford gets a new police chief inspector named Pignon Scorbion. And he is very Holmes and Poirot-like in that he's deductive and he's observational. And he's an eccentric character, as both of them are. And he uniquely solves his cases in a barbershop because he and the town barber, Calvin Brown, used to be friends in a previous municipality that they worked in. And when Scorbion came to Haxford and Calvin was there, he renewed the friendship and he started solving his cases there with the assistance of Calvin and his barbers and his shoeshine man and a young reporter and a very brilliant and beautiful female bookshop owner. And the novel has 3 mysteries in it, 3 crimes: a crime of passion, a fortune seeker, and a murder at a circus. And I've written it kind of in the old, fun, classic whodunit style, so that it's really a throwback to the Agatha Christie type book. I want people to be able to kind of relive that calmer, gentler era and lose some of the stressors of today's society, if you will. I don't hear you.
There we go. I muted myself so that way in case there was feedback from Facebook. But your timing couldn't be more perfect. You know, one of the things that we have talked about a lot during doing these virtual events is in the last 2 years since COVID started, people have really been going back to those comfort reads. We have sold through our Agatha Christie section at the store just over and over and over again. And she's always been a big seller for us, but I mean, nothing like we've seen. You know, people have just gobbled up Richard Osman's The Thursday Murder Club. People are just looking for these these just comfort mysteries, which is sort of funny when you think about that we're finding comfort in these books where people get murdered. So what do you think it is about mysteries, and specifically kind of classic mysteries like this, that bring people comfort?
Well, I think it's, first of all, it's a style that people are familiar with, for one thing, and it doesn't add to the blood and guts, if you will, that you see on television or the movies, in terms of both real life and fictitious life, if you will. I think people like a good old-fashioned mystery where they can kind of pit their own intelligence against what's going on. And can I figure this out? Is it going to be too easy to figure out? Not easy enough to figure out? I just think people enjoy a good challenge. And I think they like that era. I mean, look, let's not kid ourselves. Downton Abbey is one of the most successful TV shows, and it's that era. This book takes place in the Downton Abbey era, and people seem to be really liking that. If you look at the success of BBC and BritBox and things like that, and the mysteries they have on, I just think people like that era, and they just kind of like being transported back and having some interesting mysteries, but set in a different environment than today.
Yeah. So because this is a historical mystery, what kind of research did you do for time period and character development, things like that?
Much more than I ever could have imagined I was going to do when I started out. I wanted to make sure that the book rang true, and that when I say believable, look, it's a work of fiction, but I wanted it to, I've incorporated real life events in it, and real life people, as well as the fictitious characters. And in order to make it feel real, I realized it was the details that I had to get right. So, I just researched everything from language to names to places to events to, in the book, I give the Scorbions, mother and father, how they met, where they met, and their backstories. I had to research all of that. Even his name, Pignon Scorbion, I researched and came up with a name that I thought would be a little unique, but yet it would be kind of familiar sounding at the same time. And it took me, I had to do a lot of research to find that out, a ton. But you know what? If you don't get it right, people are going to know.
Mm-hmm. And they are quick to tell you that if I've learned anything from historical fiction authors, if you get a historical detail wrong, or even if you get something that somebody might perceive as wrong, they will definitely let you know.
Yes, and I can't say that I necessarily got 100% right. I'd like to think I did. I don't know, but I didn't write about real events. I think when you're writing historical fiction and it's about a real event, it's really incumbent to get everything right. Mm-hmm. I'm not excusing myself, because I tried to get everything as right as possible. If something slipped up, I didn't know it, but I tried to do it.
Yeah, that's where you're covered by the fact that, like you said, it's historical fiction, so you've got a little bit of leeway there to play with some stuff.
Yes, but fortunately, most people are going, "Oh, I really like this," and they're not going, "Wow, that's not believable."
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit? You said you researched Pignon's name. Can you tell us a little bit about where his character came from?
Yeah, sure. Well, I actually came up with his father and his mother's backgrounds before I came up with who he was, in a way. Um, so it just came. I've got to explain. The way I write is things just appear in my head and they play out like a movie. And my job is to sit at a computer and capture everything I'm seeing so that it can be described to someone who will ultimately read it. So it came into my mind one day that he was going to have an Egyptian father and a Haitian mother. Can't tell you why, it was just there. And so then I kind of went, well, okay, so what does that mean exactly? So I found, playing in my mind, this backstory of his dad and what he did and how he ended up being an entrepreneur and buying an ocean going vessel, crossing the ocean, and landing in Haiti, where he met the mother. I researched the name Scorbion, the family name. It's a Arabic Egyptian name that means adventurous and entrepreneurial. So it fit the character, and it kind of is like the word scorpion. So it's not that foreign sounding, but I felt it fit the character. And then as far as his first name, Pignon, I found through my research that there's actually a town and a mountain in Haiti called Pignon that was named after the French explorer who was the first European to go there. And that's where his mother and his father met. And they thought it'd be good to ceremoniously name him after where they met and where he was conceived. And that's how it came to be Pignon Scorbion.
Wow. So you came up with all of that backstory before you came up with him as a character?
For the most part, yeah. I had the story in my mind, and I was writing it, typing it down, but I didn't know exactly who the protagonist was going to be. I had some of the barbers before I even had Scorbion, if you will. I got him shortly thereafter. It wasn't like a matter of years or anything. And then when I came up with what his background was, who he was, just immediately locked in and fell in place.
Yeah. I love that you've used the barbershop. It's amazing to me that more mysteries have not utilized that. There's a really great cozy series by Louise Innes, and it's set in a beauty parlor. And it just seems like the perfect location or perfect job for a mystery character because it's such a community hub and you get so much gossip and stuff there. So can you tell us a little bit about the barbershop and the barbers who are just this great secondary cast in this book?
Sure, absolutely. And one of the reasons it is in the barbershop is what you just said, because it is a community hub, and it was even more so back in that era. And so in addition to Calvin Brown, who owns the shop and has been friends with Scorbion for years, he was an apprentice barber who used to cut his hair back when Scorbion was a constable in another town. There's Eve, and I'm butchering French. It's probably Yves or something like that, but I call him Eve. And Eve is a Frenchman who is very short, stands on a pomade crate in order to cut hair. And he has a running kind of banter, bickering, whatever you want to call it, back and forth with Barnabas, who is a giant of a man with a long crimson crackling beard. And they are just constantly needling each other. They're best friends, and at the same time, they're, kind of going after each other. Mm-hmm. And then you have Thomas, who's the shoeshine man. He's a younger fellow who's not quite as sure of himself and doesn't feel that he's quite on the same intellectual level as Scorbion and some of the others. You have Billy Arthurson, who is the young newspaper reporter, who actually was the newspaper printing press mechanic who started writing the stories about Scorbion's adventures when he met him, and he becomes part of it. And then you have Thelma Smith, who initially is a suspect in one of the crimes, but then ends up becoming part of the group that solves the crimes. And she's the bookstore owner, and they all are in Haxford.
So since you're starting out a series, one of the great things about a mystery series, especially mystery series like this, is that you get these great secondary characters that just opens up this whole world for another series. So are you doing yourself a favor in keeping good notes of all of this stuff now that you're starting out, so that way if you have to go back to it in other books, you've got all that info there?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm making more notes. And I just literally a week ago completed writing the second book in the series, and I'm now going through it. Thank you. And I'm going through it and editing it, and I'll be turning it into Blackstone in a couple of weeks. And I don't know if there'll be a third book or a fourth book or not. I guess it'll depend on how the first two do. I certainly hope there will. I love writing these characters. They kind of become a second life to me, if you will. So yeah, I keep a lot of notes.
Good. So do you have, when you were starting the first one, did you have kind of a series arc in mind for the character, or were you just writing one to see what was going to happen there?
Actually, when I started writing the book, I started writing it as a short story. I was in a writers group of poets and short story writers and one or two novelists. And I really had written mostly nonfiction and shorter things before. And so when I joined the group, they said, try your hand at a fiction short story. And I started writing this. And when I brought it in and started reading it to them, they all said, we love these characters. We love what you're doing. This needs to be a book. So it never was intended to be anything but a short story, but then it developed into the book, and now it's developing into a series. And, I'm thrilled by that. I'm having fun. And, I hope people have fun with me, because I'm having fun.
Good. So are any of those, a lot of times when people kind of take a short story and they expand it, like a lot of those early elements get lost. So did a lot of the original short story still make it into the final product, or did it end up being something completely different?
No, it absolutely did. In fact, as I said, there are 3 crimes in it, and one of those crimes is the original short story. It's been expanded and modified, but yeah, it definitely stayed in the book.
And are you still in that writers group?
No, the writers group disbanded. Some people moved away. A few, unfortunately, passed away. And I would have loved to, but the group just didn't stay together. And but I'll tell you, if there are any aspiring writers out there, I would certainly encourage them to find other writers and join a group and get critique on their work. It makes you a better writer.
And I always forget to mention, if anybody is in Houston, we do have within the last year, we were lucky enough to get I guess 2 years at this point, we were lucky enough to get a local Sisters in Crime chapter. They were able to meet in the store once before COVID happened. And so since then, they have been meeting virtually. But if you visit the store's website, they usually meet like the 3rd Sunday of the month. And they were originally going to try to get back in the store this month in March. But it looks like April will be their first in-store /hybrid. So if there's anybody out there looking for writers groups, definitely check out the Houston Sisters in Crime group. It's a great group of people, and we're super excited to have a chapter in town.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know if you're interested, but I could tell you what takes place in the second book, if that's of any interest.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, give us a little sneak preview.
Yeah, a little sneak preview. Well, like in the first book, there are 3 crimes in the second book. I mean, it is something I plan on doing in every book, is having multiple crimes. It's kind of real life. Police and law enforcement aren't always just working on one crime. So we have in the second book a hot air balloonist who is shot and killed while in the balloon alone. We have a blacksmith who is on his way home from having helped deliver calves, who gets shot by a bow and arrow. And thirdly, and why am I blanking on thirdly? I guess I'm so focused on the first book, I'm blanking on thirdly. Sorry, I'll come back to it.
I imagine it's always tricky when you're, like you said, you've just finished this one, so you've had your head down in that, but you're also trying to promote one that you've So how long had you been writing the first book? You started it a while ago, right?
Yes. I mean, I remember what the third crime was, and then I'll answer that. Third crime is someone who actually dies in the barbershop. Okay. Now, I I started writing the book back in 2015, but I didn't write it totally continuously. I also wrote a couple of other books in between, neither of which have seen the light of day, and that's perfectly fine. Neither of them were mysteries. I think I'm better at writing mysteries than science fiction or magical realism. But I started in 15, and I would say I completed it in 2019. And then it went through editing. And the editors are a phenomenal group who absolutely help writers make things better.
So writing a mystery with one mystery in it seems daunting enough, but doing one where you're kind of solving three, were you plotting them all out as you were writing, or were you doing it by the seat of your pants?
I was doing it totally by the seat of my pants. It was just appearing in my brain, and I was capturing it. Where I did plot it, if you will, is after I wrote the first draft, I went back through the entire book and I added red herrings. I added a character or two. So I manipulated what I had written, but the initial draft was just totally seat of the pants, and it was just there.
So what do you think it was? You said, you seem well more suited to mystery than other stuff. What do you think it was about this story and kind of this genre that's the thing that just clicked and worked for you?
Well, I think part of it is that I tried to write the book, as I kind of said, in a more realistic fashion, like where I know people know it's fiction, but I'm hoping that as people read it, they kind of like the characters. They kind of feel, oh, this could have happened. Like I set up a universe where Poirot and Holmes are real characters that were alive at the same time in a way as Scorbion, although Holmes had passed away right before that, but Scorbion knew Watson. So I tried to create a fictitious reality, if you will. And I found that from my days in writing magazine and newspaper articles and columns that were nonfiction, that was kind of similar to writing this book, because I was writing something that felt real to me, as opposed to when you write science fiction and fantasy, it's just not real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's always interesting. I love talking with mystery authors because so many of the building blocks are the same. Though, fantasy authors always talk about how they have to do this world building and you have to create this entire world. And if it's a magic system or some kind of science and all of that stuff, but you guys have to do the exact same thing when you're doing mystery. It might be based in the real world, but you still have to do all of that real world stuff. You're just not necessarily creating like spells and like spacecrafts and things like that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that probably one of the differences is in general is that when you're writing a mystery based on Earth in a time period that has existed, you're creating a fictitious universe, but it's a universe that's grounded in reality. Whereas when you're writing science fiction and you're writing outer space, you're writing a universe that is not grounded in anything that actually occurs on Earth. Yeah. So it's to me, that's a much harder task.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I think that's really cool about this book as well, for anybody who's watching, as we mentioned, it's just a really great traditional mystery that will appeal to a wide range of readers, as evidenced by just the really cool like diversity of the blurbs that you got for this. I mean, you got blurbs from like Heather Graham, who does kind of these really great paranormal thrillers, to Reed Farrell Coleman, who does this kind of great noirish PI stuff, or Andrews and Wilson, who does these really big like action-packed thrillers. So you really have run the gamut. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the process of getting those blurbs and what it was like to get them from so many other people that do so much in different subgenres of mystery?
Yeah, sure. And it's also interesting that I got blurbs from non-mystery writers like Shelley Shepard, Grant Tasha Boyd, who do historical fiction, and Ed Battistella, who's an educational writer. And I would say that I am fortunate because I work for the publisher, And I have relationships over the years with all of these authors and more. And so when I approached them and said, would you be willing to read my book? And if you like it, would you say something about it? I was fortunate in that I had those relationships. But at the same time, to a person, they all were saying, we'll do it, but if we don't like it, we're not going to blurb it. So what was fortunate is that they all liked the book. I think because it's historical fiction, cozy, a little bit of everything in a way, it like you said, it appealed to a wider range than just one hardcore genre type of reader.
Yeah. And those books like that are a bookseller's dream, a book that literally anybody could pick up any book that comes in, but there are those books that, it doesn't matter what subgenre that people read, that they can find something in this to love. Like those books are like a bookseller's dream.
Well, I'll tell you something that really pleased me. And that was, I do Pilates, and my Pilates teacher has a 15-year-old son. And he's a very, very particular reader. He has specific things he likes. So she got a copy of my book, and he took it from her, and he started reading it. And she told me that he read it nonstop over 2 nights, and that he asked her if there's another book in the series. So the fact that a 15-year-old would and there's nothing in the book that's inappropriate for a 15-year-old. So that was very pleasing to me, that it could span age and not just interest.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We love books like that, and we find that like historical mysteries like yours, or like Laurie Kingsmere, Russell or Allen and Bradley's Flavia de Luce, they're really, or like the Elizabeth Peters books by Amelia Peabody, they're really great like bridge books for like teens who are ready for like adult reading level, but not necessarily sometimes the adult content that you can find in thrillers. So it's really fun with like those, or even like a lot of the contemporary cozies. It's always fun to kind of put those books in those teens' hands and kind of like be their first big introduction into the genre.
Well, I think one of the things that he liked about my book was not just the mysteries and the characters, but I think he liked the fact that there's humor in it. I tried to introduce not just the mysteries and the characters, but get people to laugh and enjoy themselves.
So through the editing process, then, did you do, this is, I asked this at a couple of cozy panels, and it's always a fun question. But so did you do like a humor pass when you're doing through the edits? Like, oh, maybe it's been a while, or like I could tighten up this joke. Did you read it again to make sure that you had those beats in there?
Actually, I did not. Because I didn't put jokes in for the sake of them being jokes. I tried to put them in as being what the characters would actually be like, as opposed to one-liners. So I went through and made sure the characters rang true. So no, that is something I didn't do.
So you mentioned working for a publishing company. You work for Blackstone. What's it like being on both sides of the end, being on the publisher end and the author end? Does it make it easier? How does that work for you?
Well, it's interesting. I was as you said earlier when you introduced me, I was in the music industry before I was in publishing, and I was in both ends of that. I mean, I was producing records and I was a record executive. I was a musician and I was, whatever. So I'm kind of used to that my whole life, of having a right brain, left brain, of here's the businessman and here's the creative side. And I've enjoyed both sides. I'm 77 years old. I could have retired by now. I know I would have been bored. I'm a type A personality. So it's like, but I enjoy working with all the authors. I enjoy helping find and nurture new authors and help them achieve success. And I've learned a lot from the authors. I mean, I've been with Blackstone now, I guess it's 16 years. And over that time, I've seen all sorts of different authors and how they approach the marketing of their books, the writing of their books, etc. And I learned from them, and it helped me in the launch of and writing of my book, because I tried to take best of what I saw and incorporate as much as I was capable of incorporating.
Yeah. Awesome. So you mentioned working in the music industry. Can you tell us a little bit about what the journey was for you to go from working in the music industry and being a record producer to being an author? What was the reason for the switch there?
Okay, well, if you don't mind, I need to go back a little because I've kind of written my whole life. I wrote and published a sports newspaper when I was 12, and I sold the 4 carbon copies to my neighbors. And then I wrote a play when I was 15. I was in film school in college and wrote scripts to the student films that I was making. And then even while I was in the music industry, I was writing newspaper columns. I was writing articles for magazines, mostly nonfiction, but I was also writing songs. And I wrote a science fiction rock opera, co-wrote a science fiction rock opera that almost got produced, but Robert Stigwood, I don't know if you know him or not, he found the Bee Gees and Eric Clapton and a number of others. He was a real impresario. He chose to produce Evita instead of my rock opera.
Wow.
It's a good company to be in, though. So anyway, and so I've produced over 50 albums and singles, have a Grammy nomination. So even while I was working as an executive in the music industry, I was always doing creative things as well. I retired from the music industry in the early 2000s, moved from New York City to Ashland, Oregon, where I live now, and retired and got bored out of my mind. And a very good friend of mine who owns the audio rights to Winnie the Pooh, came to Ashland to license that to Blackstone, which he did. And he stayed at my house with my wife and I. And while he was at Blackstone, he said to Craig Black, who was the owner and founder of Blackstone, you should know my friends, Rick and Deborah, because they were both major executives in New York, and they probably could add something to your company. So the next week, Craig and Deborah and I had lunch, and he hired us as consultants and to be on his board of directors. Deborah ended up retiring after a few years, and I've been there ever since. So, and the one thing I will say is creativity is the same in a way, no matter what the field. It is not a hard transition from musicians to authors. They're creating a good artistic product, and it's very, very similar. And a lot of the ways that you promote them and market them are very similar.
Yeah. So speaking of that, you have some really interesting marketing stuff that you've done for this book. I read that you created a video game for it.
I did. There is a Pignon Scorbion video game that's in both the Apple and the Google Play app stores. It's a find the hidden objects game that has 6 scenes that are scenes from the book with objects that are in the book that you have to find in the scenes. The first 4 levels are totally free to anyone, but the last 2 levels are locked, but the unlock code is printed in the book and is in the audio book and the ebook. And so it's still totally free if you get the book. You can get it at a library and don't pay for it. I'd rather they go to your store and buy it, obviously. But it's totally free in a way, and I'm a lover of hidden object games, and so I just thought it'd be really kind of fun to have that. And what I was trying to create in the launch of this book was, in a way, a multi-sensory experience, because on one hand, you've got your eyes that deal with the book, and in a way, the video game, although it may be a slightly different part of your brain that you're using in a video game than reading a book. But I also wrote and recorded a theme song for Scorbion that's in the game and in the audio book. And we did a video trailer. I did an author logo. We did T-shirts for human beings and dogs. I just kind of, I took a lot of what I learned in the music industry and marketing films and acts and said, let's apply it to launching a book.
Yeah, that's really cool. So did you write the script for the video game, or did you give somebody the book and turn it over to them to do?
Well, I didn't actually create the video game, but I told them what scenes I wanted, what objects I wanted, what I wanted it to look like, and then they developed the game. And I was, of course, approving it every step of the way.
That's really cool. It seems like that's such a really cool world for other authors to play in, because you've already created this world, so to be able to take it and reformat it into a different media thing, that's really cool.
I had a lot of fun doing it. Again, it comes back to the word fun. I have fun, and I hope people have fun with everything that I'm doing.
So can you tell us, we've talked a little bit about the new book. You've given us a sneak preview of what's coming up next. Can you tell us a little bit about your, like some of those mystery touchstones for you, the inspirations for this book, or the things that really made you want to try your hand at a mystery?
Well, yeah, I've been a mystery reader my entire life. I'm pretty sure that the earliest memory I have of reading mysteries was the Hardy Boys series. I mean, I devoured that series. And then I've read every book that I possibly could that Agatha Christie wrote, both Marple and Poirot and others. I've read every Sherlock Holmes story and book. And then I loved everybody from Chandler to Hammett to Chester Himes to Rex Stout, Earl Stanley Gardner, Ellery Queen, Simenon. I just always have read classic mysteries. At the same time, I also like contemporary mysteries. I've been a huge fan of Robert B. Parker's Spencer series. I love the humor and the characters in that. I love Clive Cussler. I love how he takes history and infuses it in his stories. And so it's just always, I've drawn my inspirations from the things that I've read and I've enjoyed and tried to pluck out of them and incorporate what I liked.
Mm-hmm. And so we always get this question. I love hearing from authors, especially people who are not only authors, but also work in publishing. But what are some things that you've read lately that you've loved?
Well, I have a problem answering that because the majority of what I read are the books and manuscripts that are submitted to me for potential. And it's like, which of your children do you like better? And if I singled out one or two of them, the rest of them would go, well, why not me? So I'm going to answer that question with two books, one of which is not a Blackstone book and one of which is a Blackstone book. The one that's not a Blackstone book, and it's not one I've read recently, but it's one I've reread recently, is Shadow of the Wind by Pignon. Okay, I mean, I just love that book. I can't say enough about it. And anybody that hasn't read it, I think you're doing yourself a disfavor not reading that book.
It's a huge staff favorite at Murder by the Book, too. It's like every one of us has said like that's one of our favorites of all time.
Well, great. Yeah. And the other book I want to point out is not a very typical book, but I think it's something that people should read. And it's a book called Grandma Says, Wake Up World. And it was written by the oldest Native American in Oregon. Her name is Grandma Aggie, Agnes Baker Pilgrim. She has passed away since she wrote the book. And it's her story of her life, the anecdotes of being an indigenous American, a first American, and advice on how to keep the world to be a safer and better place for people to live in. And I just think it is fascinating for people to be able to hear from an elder what it's really like and was like, and what the spiritual realm of Native Americans think should be going on in the world.
So for anyone who is watching, if you are not familiar with either of those books, I have dropped links to both of those on the Murder by the Book website in the comments, so you can check those out there. So I also wanted to ask, your website has this incredible list of independent bookstores. I think I read that there's like 1,300 bookstores on this list or something like that. How, like, it's amazing. How did you put that together?
I had help from Blackstone. I mean, I worked with Blackstone to compile that list, and I keep adding stores to it because there are more than 1,300, but those are the 1,300 we could find, if you will. And so I have always been a supporter of independent retail. When I was in the music industry, I was instrumental in the beginnings of the Coalition of Independent Music Stores. And I just believe that independent music stores and bookstores are the lifeblood of the music and publishing industries. And I just felt it was really important for people to have a place to go where they could find, sorted by state, the contact information for independent bookstores around the United States. And it's important to me.
Yeah, I was looking at it today when I was doing prep for this, and it's a really, really impressive list. It's really cool that you've done that.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
So I had a question from my coworker, Brenda, who has just finished the book and really loved it. She wanted to know, and you touched on this a little bit. Let me pull up the text so I can get the question right. So she wanted to know, did you know that the character of Pignon was going to be so eccentric, or did his eccentricities kind of reveal themselves to you as you were writing them?
They revealed themselves to me as I was writing him. I knew I wanted him to be eccentric, but I wasn't quite sure in what manner. And he just blossomed like a flower, and his eccentricities just opened themselves up to me.
Awesome. There's for those watching, I'm also going to drop this in the link. Rick did a really fun interview where he actually wrote the interview as the character, and it talks a little bit about like his fashion and things like that, which is really fun. So I'm going to drop that in the comments for people to check out as well. Make sure I'm just going to scroll through these comments real quick to make sure that we're not missing any questions. So are you actually getting to do, we talked a little bit beforehand that you've done a handful of virtual events with bookstores and stuff. Are you actually going to get to do an in-store signing anywhere for this?
I'm going to be doing my very first in-store signing later this month in San Diego. And I'm going down there actually with Rex Pickett, who lives there. Rex and I have become good friends, and Rex and I are going to be interviewed together on their TV station, one of their major TV stations down there. And then that evening, we're going to do a joint in-store.
Fun. That's one of the things, it's been really great to do these virtual events, but it's been hard to talk to a lot of debut authors over the last 2 years who have not gotten to get that experience of actually getting to be in a bookstore. So I'm so glad that you get to have that experience.
Well, I would love to come and visit you in person at some point too. I mean, yes. I'd love to be there.
Yeah, so we will keep our fingers crossed that we keep moving in the direction that we're moving. So that way, this time next year when book 2 is out, we can get you to Houston and get people to get to meet you and shake hands and sign some books.
Do I have time to make a plug for another book I've got that I'm in that's coming out?
Definitely.
In May, there is a anthology of newly written mystery short stories coming out called Hotel California. And it's part of a music and murder series. The first book is Hotel California. The second one, a year from now, will be Thriller, and Back in Black will be the third one. And the tie to this is that the title of each story in the book is the title of a song in the album. The subject matter isn't the same, but the titles are. And I have a story in there. It's a contemporary story about a New York hitman who has a hit on his life, and he escapes to Hawaii. And it's the story of the cat and mouse game between him and the hitman that's sent to finish him off. And I am the least well-known author in this book. We have, there's Heather Graham's in there, and Amanda Flower, Reed Farrell Coleman, and there's even going to be a new Jack Reacher story in there written by Child. So, and that comes out in May, also from Blackstone. So I'm looking forward to not just doing Scorbion, but doing more characters, although Scorbion is absolutely my focus.
Yeah. So was it hard for you to shift perspectives from writing something so historical to writing a contemporary story?
I would say medium, not hard, not hard, not totally easy. Again, like with the Scorbion book, the story just appeared to me and I started writing it down. But at some point, I started lapsing into the pacing and the vernacular of 1910. So I had to catch myself and go back and go, no, that's not how they speak today. So that's where it got a little funny, but I got it right finally.
Awesome. Perfect. So I think that is going to about do it for us for this evening. But I want to recap for anybody who might have joined us late. We have been chatting with Rick Bleiweiss, whose debut novel, Pignon, Scorbion, and the Barbershop Detectives has just come out. We do have signed copies at Murder by the Book. As we were saying, it's just a really great historical, traditional whodunit in the vein of Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie. It's just a really great comfort read. We're all big fans of it at Murder by the Book. If you are a member of our Murder by the Box subscription, you have a copy heading your way. We are so excited to pick it for our February title. If you missed any part of our chat, once we are done, YouTube will archive it. We'll get this uploaded to and linked on Facebook too, since it was still being a little bit wonky. But Rick, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the support of my book. I truly, without people like you and your store, authors would be in a different place.
Well, we appreciate it. And like I said, we will keep our fingers crossed. So this time next year, we'll be able to do it here in the store.
Right on. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take care.